All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into one of the most enduring mysteries out there, Skull and Bones.
Ooh, yeah, Skull and Bones, the ultimate secret society. Always a good one to get the conspiracy gears turning.
You got that right. And today we're going straight to the source, or at least as close as we can get, right? We've got excerpts from Skull and Bones, the Ivy League, and the Hidden Paths of Power. And to add a little extra fuel to the fire, we'll also be looking at a recent MSNBC article on the topic.
Nice. So we're talking about separating fact from fiction, or at least trying to, right? When it comes to Skull and Bones, there are so many stories, rumors, legends. Where do you even begin?
Well, I figured the best place to start is right at the beginning with their origin story. And the book doesn't disappoint. It paints quite a picture.
Oh, yeah, it's a wild one. So picture this. Early 1830s, we've got William H. Russell, a Yale student.
A Yale student, but not just any Yale student.
Right, not just any student. This guy is heir to a serious fortune thanks to the family's involvement in the opium trade.
Opium trade. Wow. Okay, so already we're dealing with a character who's probably used to getting what he wants.
Exactly. So this Russell fellow heads off to Germany to study for a year. And while he's there, he gets mixed up with a secret society. They use a death's head as their emblem. Can you imagine?
Okay, a death's head. That's pretty intense. Definitely sets the tone for a secret society.
Right. And get this. The book even hints that this German group might have had ties to the Illuminati. Yeah, the Illuminati.
Yeah.
That legendary shadowy organization supposedly pulling the strings behind the scenes. You know the one.
Okay, so we're talking about secret societies within secret societies. It's getting deeper.
It is. So Russell comes back to Yale and finds out his beloved Phi Beta Kappa Society, the Honor Society, has lost its secrecy because of all the anti-Masonic sentiment swirling around at the time. So what does he do? He decides to create his own super secret, super powerful group to fill the void.
Enter Skull and Bones, shrouded in mystery from the very beginning. It really makes you wonder how much of their rituals and traditions are based on those early German influences.
Oh, absolutely. And to solidify that connection, they adopted the numerical symbol 322. Now, the book initially says that 322 stands for the year the society was founded, 1832.
1832, okay. And the 2 represents the second chapter of the German organization.
Exactly. But then later on, the book kind of contradicts itself. It says Skull and Bones was actually founded in 1833.
Wait, so which is it, 1832 or 1833?
Right. It's like even their founding date is shrouded in mystery. Makes you wonder if that 322 symbol is more about, symbolism than historical accuracy.
Classic secret society behavior. Gotta keep people guessing. But okay, say you are a Yale student back in the day, and you're thinking, hey, maybe this Skull and Bones thing sounds kind of cool. How do you even get in the door, so to speak?
Connections, my friend, connections. The book is pretty clear that they preferred recruits from wealthy Protestant families. Legacy admissions were also a big thing. Fathers, grandfathers who were already bonesmen. Huge advantage.
So it wasn't exactly a level playing field. You pretty much had to be born into the right circles to even have a shot.
Not exactly the most democratic system, but hey, exclusivity was the whole point, right? And for those lucky few who did get chosen, they got to hang out in their oh-so-creepy headquarters, the Tomb.
Ah, yes, the Tomb. Very fitting name, right. Adds to the whole mystique. But getting into this super exclusive club wasn't just about showing up with the right last name. The initiation rituals, that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little disturbing.
Oh yeah, the rituals are definitely the stuff of legend. We're not talking your average fraternity hazing here. Imagine wrestling in mud, symbolizing death to your old self, and then, get this, lying naked in a coffin.
Whoa, hold on. Naked in a coffin, that's taking things to a whole new level.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of that? Some kind of psychological test?
That's what the book suggests, a form of psychological conditioning. Break them down, make them confront their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. And then on top of all that, they had to confess their deepest, darkest sexual secrets.
Their entire sexual history. I mean, that just seems like a huge invasion of privacy. And the book itself isn't even clear about what exactly was confessed. At first it says entire sexual history. Then it says innermost sexual secrets.
Yeah, you're right. It's a little vague, a little confusing. Makes you wonder how much of this is exaggeration or just plain rumor.
Like, is it just salacious details to make the story more exciting? Or is there something more to it? It's hard to know for sure.
It really is. That's the problem with Skull and Bones, right? The secrecy makes it almost impossible to separate fact from fiction. But speaking of strange things, they also have this thing called a bones whore, who lives in the tomb.
A bones whore. Wow, okay, I'm going to be honest. That term feels very outdated and honestly pretty offensive.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to acknowledge that the language used in the book reflects a very specific and potentially harmful view of sexuality. And of course, this is just one source, so we don't have any independent confirmation of this claim.
Right. Got to take it with a grain of salt. Still, even if we set aside the terminology, the idea that they have someone in this role is bizarre. What was their purpose supposed to be?
Well, according to the book, it was to help the initiates mature. Though, what exactly that means is left very vague. It's one of those things that raises more questions than it answers.
Definitely. And it really highlights the need to think critically about everything we hear about Skull and Bones. There are a lot of potential biases and agendas at play here.
Absolutely.
But setting aside those more sensational elements for a second, the book also claims that becoming a bonesman came with some serious perks. Financial security for life, a $15,000 graduation gift, even a grandfather clock as a wedding present.
A grandfather clock, that's
Cool.
a very specific and strange gift.
Yes, not your typical wedding registry item. But it's not just about the material benefits. The book also says that bonesmen were basically guaranteed top jobs at banks, law firms, you name it.
It's like an instant, super powerful network right at your fingertips.
Okay, so we've got connections, influence, and a guaranteed path to success. Not a bad deal if you can stomach those initiation rituals and, whatever's going on with the bones whore. But of course, there's a catch, and it's a big one. Absolute secrecy, break the code of silence, and you're in big trouble.
The book doesn't mince words about the lengths they'll go to protect their secrets. Threats, intimidation, the whole 9 yards.
They even share a story about this author, Steve, who was working on 2 leaks about Skull and Bones. He had actual documents, photos from inside the tomb, but the society found out about it. Broke into his apartment, stole his research, and basically scared him into hiding. The books were never published.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what else they're hiding if they're willing to go to those lengths. And speaking of chilling details, the book mentions a bloody knife displayed in the tomb. Rumor has it, it was used to kill a member who threatened to expose them.
Yeah, it definitely adds to the whole sinister vibe. And let's not forget, the author of this book received threats after publishing her work. So even trying to shed light on Skull and Bones can be a dangerous game.
Okay, so we've got secrecy, intimidation, possibly even violence. It's all incredibly shady. But the question remains, is it all true? Can we really believe everything we read?
That's the million-dollar question. The book itself acknowledges that it can be tough to separate truth from exaggeration when it comes to Skull and Bones.
It's like trying to peel back the layers of an onion. Every time you think you've got a handle on things, there's another layer of mystery underneath.
Exactly. That's the real power of secrecy, right? It fuels speculation, makes it almost impossible to know what's real and what's just a good story. But even if we take everything with a grain of salt, it's clear that they go to great lengths to keep their secrets. And that secrecy itself raises some big red flags. What are they so desperate to hide? Why is it so important to keep everything under wraps?
Excellent questions. And to understand the possible answers, we need to go beyond the origins and the rituals and look at the bigger picture, the influence that Skull and Bones has allegedly had on American institutions. That's where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit scary.
So we've established that Skull and Bones loves its secrets. But what about all the rumors about their influence on American society? Is that just hype, or is there some truth to those claims?
Well, the book certainly makes some bold claims. They basically say bonesmen have their fingers in every pie you can imagine. Finance, government, media, the whole shebang.
They're not just talking about, like, mid-level bureaucrats, right? The book specifically names 3 U.S. presidents who were bonesmen.
3 presidents. Yet William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. All bonesmen. And the list goes on from there. We're talking Supreme Court justices, senators, congressmen, you name it. Even CIA operatives, apparently.
Wow, that's quite a roster. It definitely makes you wonder if there's something to this whole Skull and Bones network, right? But is there any actual proof that their membership had any real impact on their decisions in office?
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The book presents a lot of correlations, pointing out that these powerful people were bonesmen. But correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Just because someone was a member doesn't automatically mean they were acting on behalf of the society or letting their membership influence their decisions.
Right, right. It's like saying everyone who went to Harvard is part of some secret cabal. It just doesn't hold up. Still, the sheer number of bonesmen in these high-level positions is hard to ignore.
It definitely raises some eyebrows. especially when the book gets into specific examples of their alleged influence, like this claim that there's a skull and bone cell operating within the CIA.
A skull and bone cell in the CIA. That sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller.
It does, doesn't it? The book suggests that the CIA might be drawn to bonesmen because of their reputation for secrecy and loyalty, which I guess makes sense when you think about all those initiation rituals and the vow of silence.
Okay, I can see that. But it also makes you think about the potential downsides. If a secret society has infiltrated a government agency like the CIA, shouldn't we be concerned about transparency and accountability? How can we be sure that their actions are truly in the best interest of the country and not just serving some secret agenda?
That's a valid concern. And it's not just the CIA. The book also links Skull and Bones to some major financial institutions, like J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Brown Brothers Harriman. At one point, they claim over a third of the partners at Brown Brothers Harriman were bonesmen.
So we're talking about Wall Street, the heart of American finance. If Skull and Bones has that much influence in these firms, what does that mean for the economy? Are they manipulating things behind the scenes to benefit themselves and their fellow bonesmen?
That's certainly what the book seems to imply. It even goes so far as to allege that through these financial connections, Skull and Bones provided financial support to Adolf Hitler.
Wait, hold on. They funded Hitler. That's a pretty serious accusation. Why would they do that?
The book claims it was because of some kind of Nazi-inspired ideology that Skull and Bones supposedly adhered to at the time. But to be honest, that sounds like a bit of a stretch. And the book doesn't really offer much in the way of evidence to support that claim.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine an elite American society aligning themselves with someone like Hitler. But even if we put that aside, the fact that they have so many connections in these powerful financial firms is still pretty concerning. It raises questions about potential conflicts of interest and whether they might be using their influence for personal gain.
Absolutely. And the book doesn't stop there. It also implicates Skull and Bones in influencing the Federal Reserve. They name several bonesmen who were allegedly involved with it, including the very first chairman.
For those who might not be familiar, the Federal Reserve is basically America's central bank. They control interest rates and have a huge influence on the U.S. economy. So if Skull and Bones is pulling strings at the Federal Reserve, that means they could be influencing the entire country's financial well-being.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. And it feeds into this idea that Skull and Bones has its tentacles in all these different parts of American society, shaping events to their liking behind the scenes.
Okay, let's recap for a second. We've got the CIA, Wall Street, the Federal Reserve. It's starting to sound like they're everywhere. Is there any part of American society they haven't infiltrated?
Well, according to the book, they've also got their hands in the media.
The media, really? How so?
The book mentions that two bonesmen founded the law firm that represents the New York Times, and it claims that the plans for both Time and Newsweek magazines were hatched in the Skull and Bones tomb.
Okay, so not only are they potentially shaping events, but they're also controlling how those events are reported to the public. That's a lot of power.
That's the suggestion, yes. And it definitely raises some concerns about media bias and whether we're getting a truly objective view of the world.
It's almost like they're trying to create their own version of reality. But I guess when you think about it, powerful people and institutions have always tried to influence the media to shape public opinion.
That's true. But the book takes it a step further. They argue that Skull and Bones even tried to influence the field of history itself.
History. Now, how do you control history?
Well, according to the book, back in the 1880s, bonesmen were instrumental in creating the American Historical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Economics Association. The book suggests they did this to control how history was written and to promote their own specific worldview.
It's like they're not content with controlling the present. They want to control the past as well. It's all starting to feel a bit overwhelming. It's like Skull and Bones is this all-powerful, all-seeing organization pulling the strings from behind the curtain.
I know, it can definitely feel that way when you read the book. But it's important to remember that we're dealing with allegations and interpretations here, not necessarily hard facts. The book itself even encourages us to be critical of the information it presents and to consider multiple perspectives.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the conspiracy theory side of things, but we need to stay grounded. Just because someone is a bonesman doesn't automatically make them a villain. I'm sure there are plenty of bonesmen who use their influence for good.
Exactly. And it's entirely possible that some of the society's rituals and traditions are more about bonding and exclusivity than actual power.
So are we saying that Skull and Bones is just a harmless club for overachieving Yale grads? A glorified fraternity with a penchant for secrecy?
Not necessarily. But we do need to be careful not to overstate their influence or ascribe sinister motives to every action taken by a bonesman. It's important to remember, correlation does not equal causation.
Okay, so be critical but not cynical. Acknowledge the potential for abuse of power, but don't jump to conclusions about grand conspiracies. It's a tricky balance.
It is, but I think it's a healthy exercise to have these conversations, to ask these questions, and to really examine the role that power and influence play in our society.
Well said. On that note, I think it's time to move on to the final part of our deep dive. We've explored the history, the rituals, and the alleged influence of Skull and Bones. But the biggest question remains, how do we separate fact from fiction when it comes to a society that thrives on secrecy and has inspired countless conspiracy theories?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But in part 3, we'll do our best to tackle that very question. We'll explore the role of speculation, the power of secrecy, and the enduring allure of conspiracy theories when it comes to Skull and Bones.
Okay, so here we are, the final chapter in our Skull and Bones saga. We've talked about their strange origins, their controversial rituals, and their alleged influence on, well, pretty much everything. But the biggest question still hangs in the air, doesn't it? How much of this is actually true?
It's the mystery,
Yeah.
right? The thing that keeps people so fascinated by Skull and Bones, this desire to uncover the truth of a society built on secrets and whispers.
For sure. And this book definitely leans into that, wouldn't you say? There's a lot of "it is said," or "some believe," which makes it really hard to separate what's based on solid evidence versus pure speculation.
Oh, absolutely. And even the book acknowledges that, the difficulty in figuring out what's real and what's just a good story when it comes to Skull and Bones. It's like they thrive on that ambiguity almost.
Like they're using secrecy as a shield, a way to deflect scrutiny and hold on to their mystique.
Exactly. And the less they reveal, the more powerful they become.
Right.
In a way, they control the narrative by saying nothing at all.
It's a brilliant strategy, honestly. It plays into that human need to know, to figure things out. The more secretive they are, the more we want to dig deeper, find those missing pieces.
Our brains love patterns, right? They love explanations. And when there's a lack of information, that's when speculation and rumor rush in to fill the void. It happens all the time with conspiracy theories.
You take an elite group, add some secret rituals, sprinkle in a bit of power and influence. That's basically the recipe for a top-tier conspiracy theory.
You hit the nail on the head. It's irresistible. But even if we strip away some of the more, let's say, outlandish claims in the book, there's still a core truth here that we need to address.
What do you mean?
Well, the undeniable fact is that a small group of individuals, bonded by these shared experiences and traditions, have gone on to hold some seriously powerful positions in American society.
Okay, so maybe they're not running a shadow government, but they are definitely in the room where it happens.
Right. And that raises questions about, fairness and access to power. Even if every single bonesman is a totally well-intentioned person,
Yeah.
the very fact that this exclusive network exists kind of reinforces the idea that certain paths to success are only open to a select few.
It challenges the idea of a true meritocracy, doesn't it? If just being a member of this club increases your chances of success, that undermines the whole notion that anyone can rise to the top through hard work and talent alone.
Absolutely. It's something to think critically about, even if we're not buying into the idea that Skull and Bones is actively pulling strings behind the scenes. It highlights the systemic issues, the inequalities that already exist.
So what's the solution then? Do we just abolish secret societies altogether?
If only it were that easy. Even if Skull and Bones disappeared tomorrow, the underlying problems of privilege and access to power would still be there.
It's bigger than one group, right? It's about the systems that create and perpetuate these inequalities in the first place. But knowing that this network exists, even if it's not as nefarious as some believe, should push us to demand more transparency, more accountability from those in power.
I couldn't agree more. We need to hold those in power accountable, push for transparency in our institutions, and work towards a society where success isn't determined by who you know or what secret club you belong to.
Well said. I think that's a great note to wrap up our Skull and Bones deep dive. We've explored the history, the rituals, the alleged influence, and it's clear there are still so many unanswered questions. But hopefully we've given you something to think about.
Absolutely. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, do your own research, question everything, and form your own conclusions. The truth is out there somewhere. It's just waiting to be uncovered.